Hello, welcome to the Joe Palmetto Law Show. I'm Joe Palmetto. I'm here with my friend Zack. Today, we are going to talk about addiction and the road back to recovery. This is an important issue to me. I think it's a good topic for my show as well, as I'm focusing on the opiate crisis in America. And also, I'm a criminal defense attorney, so I see how addiction impacts people's lives on a daily basis. A lot of my clients, this is the issue that they are dealing with. So thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, subscribe, like, and share. So Zack, how you doing today?
I'm living the dream.
All right, okay. So you heard the topic. Let's start off. So you're currently in recovery, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And how long have you been in recovery?
Almost 7 months.
Okay. And tell them exactly what recovery is in this context.
So recovery it's more than just sobriety. It's actually, sobriety is a large part of it, but it's working on, trying to be a better person. If you ever read, a lot of the 12-step books, they'll tell you that drugs are a symptom of the disease, not a cause of the disease.
Sure.
So, that's the biggest thing is, I think a lot of people find drugs make them feel different, clearly. But, it's an escape from, depression, things like that, a lot of personal issues. So that's why, whenever I first heard that drugs were a symptom, not the cause of, it really, hit home for me.
Gotcha. Okay. We'll swing back to that a little bit. Let's, if you don't mind talking about it, where would you say, the addiction story really began for you?
Well, probably like most people, I started, in high school, just trying things, and it always progressively got worse. Clearly it was, for me, it was painkillers to start, like, the majority of people in America at this point in time. And then, that kind of dried up. So you moved on to heroin.
Let me stop you there, Zack, because I find a lot in my work, or you talk to people who haven't, in America nowadays, most people's lives are touched by addiction one way or another, but there's still a lot of people who aren't, and they don't seem to understand, the progression that you just talked about. You said painkillers and then heroin. How does that happen, and why?
Mostly it's kind of convenience, in all honesty. Especially, whenever I started doing painkillers, they were more readily available because it was kind of like the beginning of the opiate crisis. It was before, it was widespread and known,
early 2000s,
right,
early 2000s.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, I think the biggest thing, the market kind of flooded because, a patent on prescription drugs lasts for 7 years. So once that patent ran out, then everybody could make, generic Oxycontins and things like that. So then it really got bad. But then they started cracking down on it. And when that happened, that's when most people moved over to heroin, because, it was, basically it still reacts the exact same way. It's the same thing, but it's a whole lot cheaper and it's easier to get your hands on.
Right. So most people would start out, say, with a low level dosage, like an Oxycontin, like a Percocet, and then you might get addicted to those because you might have some physicals, and then you work your way up. You need higher milligrams.
Yeah, your tolerance builds up.
Right. Because I just find, I think there's a perception out there, and this existed before the opiate crisis. It was like, oh, you got to be really hardcore to do heroin. That's just gone.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just gone.
Right.
You could have a housewife, a 50-year-old guy who hurt his knee and was on painkillers, and a year later he's doing heroin because it's cheaper than the Oxycontins he was taking.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you honestly, one thing that especially from being in recovery, that you'll see a lot of younger people come in nowadays because it's hitting younger and younger. I never, when I was 17, thought that I'd be doing heroin. I swore I never would, but as the progression goes on, you start doing those things, unfortunately. But the biggest thing that's kind of a surprise now is with all this fentanyl. A lot of the younger generation is anti-heroin, but they have no problem with fentanyl.
Really?
Yeah,
That's interesting.
because they see it as, it's pharmaceutical grade, and it's not heroin, so they can justify the difference between the two of them.
Interesting. So when you say pharmaceutical grade, they think it's healthier or it's safer, maybe?
I guess that's really what they're getting at. I mean, it kind of blew my mind when I first heard that, but
Yeah.
I've heard plenty of people tell stories that, oh, I would never mess with heroin, but fentanyl, they were okay with that.
That's crazy.
Absolutely. And I agree 100% that's crazy.
Don't you think, I mean, so to me, that's about the stigma that's attached to the word heroin.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Like the word fentanyl, I mean, maybe a stigma is developing. The heroin stigma has been around for, our whole lives.
Oh,
back
absolutely.
in the 50s.
Right.
Probably.
Yeah, it's been going on since like the 20s.
Right.
I mean, really.
Right.
Jazz musicians and whatnot.
Right. So it's really like, it's almost just about this word. Whereas like fentanyl is more dangerous, more addictive, I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
On every level, but somehow heroin carries the worst.
It has that negative connotation to it, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Interesting. And I wanted to make a comment. It was something that I heard recently about fentanyl. Oh, well, I've heard like some people, maybe you see this, like, because you're do you do NA now or
I
AA?
do. I do NA.
NA, okay. Is that people like the people in their addiction will seek out fentanyl specifically because it's stronger as well. Like they want the dangerous shit.
Oh yeah, right. Well, and I remember, so I had years clean for a while, and then I, almost 7 years clean, and then I had a relapse. And it was funny because I remember at one point, after the first time I got clean, there was a big rash of people overdosing. And I remember my family saying like, oh, aren't you glad you got off heroin at that point? And I had to laugh because it's like, whenever that happens, all of the people that are using seek out that drug.
Yeah.
Because usually it's not that there's a bad batch that's going around. It's that there's a good batch.
Right.
And they're used to the bad batches that are going around. So everybody's seeking out that high.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just crazy. I mean, you want the drug that might kill you because it gives you the best high.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's nuts. And then the names will reflect that too, right?
Yeah.
On because every those who don't know, stamp bags they'll be stamped with a logo, a design. It can have it might say like Black Death or something.
Yeah, I forget. I used to remember what like the big one was when everybody was overdosing.
Right.
I think it was Get High or Die Trying. I think was like
really.
Yeah, and I mean it says it right there. The more dangerous it sounds, that's what the people want.
Yeah, that's got the name.
And that's only around PA too, the stamp bag things, because I worked on the road for a while, and here they sell in stamp bags. A lot of other places you go and they sell them by like the gram and things like that. It's a whole different issue,
really,
as far as finding it. Yeah.
Okay. So because a stamp bag's like a little paper bag,
right? It's literally a wax bag that stamp collectors use to put the stamp in. It keeps them dry.
I did not know that.
That's why it's a stamp bag.
Okay. And that's not used in other areas.
Right. Yeah, in a lot of places I've traveled and managed to find drugs while on the road. And you get pretty inventive, I will say that, when trying to find drugs in other places.
Sure. So you said 7 years clean and then you had a relapse. Do you mind sharing with what caused the relapse? I mean, in detail, or you don't have to give detail?
I mean, the biggest thing, I was in a pretty bad marriage. And I finally, we separated. And I think the biggest thing was, I'll say I'm a perpetual optimist. I always, even in my addiction, I always saw the best in people. Like I remember getting beat for drugs from drug dealers, and I would be more hurt that the drug dealer would, take advantage of me than anything, But there was just a lot of bad blood, and I didn't get to see my kids as much, and it was like pretty much every agreement that we had, didn't work out, Gotcha. So, and that sent me in a downward spiral.
Gotcha. And when you said you had 7 years clean before that, did you work the recovery program before that?
I didn't
get clean.
No, I mean
7 years. Or
so I started. Of course, I went to rehab, and then I got out. I would go to meetings for a while, but I never continued with it. Like the biggest thing you hear when you talk to people, oh, I don't like going to meetings because they make me want to use, and I don't want to hear all these, war stories and things like that. And that, honestly, now that I'm working it and it finally like clicked for me, because it didn't for a long time, that that's kind of a cop out, in all honesty. You know, not everybody's ready when they go there. A lot of people are kind of forced to go there. But when you start to focus on the similarities that you have to people as opposed to the differences, because you get a lot of people that say, well, I never did that, I'm not as bad as this, I never did that. And sure, there's always going to be somebody that's worse, but guess what, you're also, there's people that are better than you, didn't do half the things that you did. And that's why it's just a big thing. You can always help somebody else by sharing your story, because to somebody else, you did these things and you're like, well, the other person is thinking, well, I didn't do that. So it makes them feel a little bit better, but then there's always somebody to make you feel better about, the things that you did as well. And even just seeing the positivity in recovery, that people have come back from these horrible things that they did.
Sure. When you got clean the first time, did you just sort of go cold turkey? You did it on your own, or did you go to some meetings? Just didn't stick, or
I just didn't. It didn't stick. I never worked any steps. I didn't read the literature. I got, and I went for a bit, and then I just kind of stopped going. And I still had tendencies. The addiction manifested itself in other ways.
Like what?
Just shopping, gambling, okay. Things like that. It always finds a way. Just, I hear a lot of people talk about how they don't believe that addiction is a disease.
Right.
And for the longest time, that was, me. I didn't agree that it was a disease. But, and I'm a very literal and logical person. So after looking into it, addiction has the exact same symptoms as obsessive compulsive disorder.
Right.
And people are okay with accepting that obsessive compulsive disorder is a disease.
A condition that you may right.
But addiction, they see it as willpower.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing that, science, says, that it's a disease. Sure. And if you can believe one, why can't you believe the other? I think it's easier for some people because they don't want to think that they could ever do that.
Right.
So they think it's, I just have stronger willpower or whatever. But I don't believe that it comes down to that. I mean, I'm not a doctor or anything, but
try not to tap too much. Everything. Yeah, it's okay. That's an interesting point that you made there about the obsessive compulsive disorder. I never really thought about it like that, right? There's all kinds of diseases that are mental or that someone may be born with, right? Or it could be a genetic component. I mean, that's what I think. With addiction, it's but we have no problem accepting a lot of other genetic diseases. These are things that you are born with and then manifest in your behavior. But for some reason, there's a lot of resistance, and even within the recovery community.
Oh, right? Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you've been in the program for 7 months now.
Yeah.
Clean 7 months.
Clean 7 months.
Congratulations.
Yep. Thank you.
That's awesome. So what do you think, and you've been working the program the last 7 months, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And this is longer than you did it
than before. I ever did before. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. And why do you think, why are you a little more dedicated this time to it, do you think?
One, I'm older.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
A lot of young people don't get it. It takes a while. You have to make some you have to make some bad decisions. And, like I mentioned before, how the, people thinking, oh, I never did that, I never did this. So a lot of people go back out and think, oh, I can handle it this time. And then they start to hit those, well, oh, wait, I did that thing that I said I would never do. Sure. And things like that. So the problem is, unfortunately, a lot of people don't make it back after, people are dying left and right.
Yeah. It's crazy. It was, I saw when I was reading recently, 70,000 overdose deaths a year. 30,000 of them are from fentanyl. I think it was 70,000 opiate related overdose deaths per year in the US. 30,000 from fentanyl. The United States didn't even lose 70,000 lives in the Vietnam War.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's a Vietnam War every year.
Yeah.
Every year.
You'll see, I've driven, in different states, and they'll have overdose death tolls. It'll be listed on the highway, overdoses, deaths in this county in this year, 19. I've seen that in Ohio.
You mean on a billboard?
No, almost like the speed things. You know what I mean? Where it tells you your speed. It'll have a literal counter saying how many people overdosed and died in that county in that year.
Sure, sure. There's even people we went to high school with that passed away.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could go through the yearbook and scratch half of them out almost.
Yeah, yeah. Really sad, really sad. Okay, so 7 months clean, and you said so you go to NA meetings?
Yes, and I go. They always say to do 90 and 90. 90 meetings in 90 days. I'm at like I said, almost 7 months, and I think I've probably only missed maybe 10 meetings.
10 days total.
10 days,
so
total.
70.
Some days I go to 2 though.
Okay.
So that's my give or take, but
Oh, that's good. That's good. What what is an NA or an AA meeting for some viewers may not know?
So, well, okay. Honestly, it's funny. We were talking about this the other day. If anybody's seen the show Mom on CBS, they're in AA, and that show is actually fairly accurate. A lot of the times,
what does AA stand for?
It's Alcoholics Anonymous.
And
the other
NA.
one, there's Narcotics Anonymous. There's plenty of other ones. There's like Cocaine Anonymous. I think in other states they have Heroin Anonymous.
Oh, really? It gets
Yeah.
that specialized?
Some of them get very specific.
Yeah.
And they're all kind of based off of the AA. They were the first ones, so there's a little bit of derivatives. But it's still basically the same thing. I mean, really, it's like a self-help group. And it really is, like I said, it's based on trying to make yourself a better person. Everybody has guilt, everybody has shame. Most addicts don't like themselves, and that was why they got into drugs. Because they got to feel different. Just like kids in college. I know when I was in college, I drank a lot because I wasn't shy. And that's usually how it starts. You can get out of your shell and start talking more, and then it just kind of progresses from there.
Gotcha. And so NA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and NA, Narcotics Anonymous, but any addict can go to either one.
Anyone, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So
addiction is addiction. I mean,
so you just sort of find the one that fits for you.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because there's even Gamblers Anonymous.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot, and they're all kind of based on the same thing. And like I mentioned earlier, that addiction is going to manifest itself in other ways. Even after time clean, you still fixate on things, and you got to correct those behaviors. It's the behaviors that are the biggest thing.
Sure. What's a typical meeting like?
So there's different kinds. There are sometimes there's speaker meetings where somebody just gets up and kind of does their lead, tells their story, and there's also like discussion meetings where people will bring up topics and you kind of go around and everybody talks about how they can relate to things like that. There's step work. So there's 12 steps, and each one there's actually like a workbook with NA that you go through, and tries to get you to dive deeper into yourself and figure out what caused this and what it all stems from and things like that. And there's also a book called Just for Today, and every day there's daily reading, and it's the same thing. It's basically a topic discussion where everybody talks about it, but you talk about the reading for that day.
Gotcha. And I was so we got the 12 steps here, and you work all of them or what?
So I got up to like the third step, and then you are supposed to work all 12.
Right.
I got up to like the third step, working through it, and I actually just started the first step over again because when I went back and read a lot of it, it doesn't pertain to me anymore. I filled it out right when I got clean, so now I just kind of want to start over with that to deal with. Now that I'm not as fixated on getting high as I was, and I want to kind of make it pertain more to my daily life in sobriety, to see how it's manifesting itself in my normal day to day whenever I'm not, using heroin.
Okay. Gotcha. The first step, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. That's probably the most important one, right?
Always. Yeah.
That's the step that you got to make the admission before you can work anything else.
Right. And that's why, and I feel like everybody knows this, that, when you're at a meeting, you always introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Zack. I'm an addict. Hi, I'm Zack. I'm an alcoholic, things like that.
Yeah.
And it's just to kind of reinforce that.
Gotcha.
To get over that stigma. I mean, is really what it is,
Right. So that you can call yourself that and feel comfortable. And then, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. And then you would believe that you actually had a problem, because you're probably living in denial.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right.
yeah, nobody thinks they're an addict for, until you realize, oh, I'm an addict, There's that's like a spiritual awakening, they always call it.
Yeah.
That's one of the big ones.
Yeah. Would you say you've had a spiritual awakening?
Yes. So I'll say my spiritual awakening. So just to get back to what got me into recovery.
Yeah.
So 7 months ago, I remember Monday, I ended up getting heroin, and and it wasn't very much. I did like 2 bags, which, at the time wasn't a lot. And I didn't remember anything. At one point I woke up and I had totaled my car and I was in lockup, and I didn't remember anything or how I got there. Apparently the cop pulled me over at gunpoint. I didn't have tire on my car because I wrecked into something. So I got out, and then the next day I borrowed a car from a friend, and I went and I got those same bags, and I wrecked her car. And kind of the funny story about this was at one point in the afternoon when I borrowed her car, I woke up on the side of the road and there was a tow truck driver sitting next to me, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm good." And he said, "Oh, well, the cops are on their way." And I'm like, "All right, well, I'm getting out of here." So I drove away. Later on that night, I totaled my friend's car, and that same tow truck driver was the guy who pulled up to tow the car. And he's like, "Do you remember me from earlier?" And no, I didn't. But apparently he talked the police out of arresting me, and he gave me a ride home. And when I got home, I wanted to kill myself. That was my turning point. And I don't remember much. I had some like flashbacks, but the next morning I woke up in the psych ward. I reached out to some friends and they drove me. And it was kind of funny because, and I've shared this before at meetings, like I remember waking up the next morning, and, most people would be terrified waking up in a psych ward, because you picture the worst. And it was like dual diagnosis floor. So it was for, people with mental and addiction. Yeah. But I remember waking up and I felt like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. And mostly because, I didn't have to live a lie anymore. I didn't believe that I was an addict. I had all this horrible stuff happen. And when I woke up, it was like, it's finally over. I don't have to keep trying to maintain these lies that were just compounding over and over. And everybody knew that I was an addict. And, I thought I was pulling it off great, but, I know that I wasn't. Now when I look back at, it was definitely unmanageable.
Yeah.
And it was honestly like the best feeling in the world.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's interesting that you felt like the weight was off your shoulders. Is that because maybe that was like you coming out of the denial and like just accepting it at that point? Or it was like, I don't have to put on this charade anymore?
Well,
maybe,
absolutely. Yeah.
To some degree.
Yeah. I mean, I remember calling my parents and, telling them, and they were happy that I was there, and I was happy that I was there. They came and visited me every day. I was in there for like 5 days. But, they were just happy that I finally admitted it, and, they didn't have to worry about me. They were glad that I woke up there and not dead, that I didn't wake up, because that happens more and more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It sounds like with your dosage that it might have been, you might have had some of that, the fentanyl.
Right.
It might have been.
Oh, well, and actually, so yeah, whenever I got the police report back because I got a DUI for that first night, it was fentanyl and Xanax. So the heroin that I bought was not heroin at all. I never liked Xanax because I never remembered anything. Like I tried Xanax before and never liked it because I've forgotten days. So it makes sense that, I had almost complete amnesia after doing that.
Sure. Yeah. That's a wild story. It's the tow truck driver, he has an interesting role in there too.
Oh yeah, right.
For the very religious people, they may say he was sort of
that was
guardian angel,
right. Oh, absolutely.
And, helped you out there.
Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of the big thing that I still struggle with. Belief in a higher power is kind of like a big thing. And, I'm one of those people that, when I hear the word God, I don't like it. Like I have my issues with organized religion and everything. But, you'll hear lots of acronyms for people that are, have issues with God. And, oh, my God is the great outdoors. Or I heard one guy share the other day, God off dope.
Wait, what? Oh, God
off dope.
Okay.
And,
I like that. I like that.
So, but like I have no problem believing in karma, because and the reason I want to bring it up is because there's a lot of people that say, oh, I can never get into recovery because I'm an atheist or I don't believe in that. But, you don't have to believe in any kind of organized thing. It's a God of your understanding. And, a lot of times I'll say the power of my understanding because I don't like hearing the word God.
Sure. And that goes back to the 12 steps, right?
Right.
You have the second step, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And then the third step, and then all these steps, they all
almost all of them mention God. Yeah.
But what you're saying is the core, really, it's just about believing in something greater than yourself.
Right. And it could be, I mean, for the longest time, that was like the biggest reason I kept going back was because they always talk about building a we. And it's just, it's not I, it's we. But once you start going to meetings every day and you start seeing the same people, you start making friends. And, if you don't show up, people care about you. They call you, they text you, they check on you. And that's really what the biggest thing is. So for me, especially at the beginning, the power greater than me was Narcotics Anonymous. It was all the people that I met because, I'm one person. I can't do, it's hard to do anything on your own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that takes me, I have a theory. I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. Obviously, I've borrowed this off of other things that I've watched or I've read. I think part of the opiate crisis, and don't get me wrong, I think most of it was the availability of these drugs, the power of these drugs, that just seeped into the culture. And it's just slow, kids would drink or smoke weed, and then it's easy to pop this tiny little, $5 pill, and you get this great high. And then after that, it can be off to the races with people, especially who have that disease, that tendency in them. But I also think a part of what's caused the crisis in America is just, a loss of cohesion amongst society. And I don't know if you agree with that, but it's like you would see, like our grandparents, right, would belong to social clubs.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that, and they would go out and maybe, they watch TV or this and that, but they were greater part of the community. It's like, it seems
absolutely.
Now.
Well, especially in, to go on like kind of a tangent, but like smartphones, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like social media and everything, you're connected to more people, but you're more alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But Narcotics Anonymous or AA can sort of, create that community, right?
Oh, 100%.
Gap in.
Well, because even when, whenever I first, was going, years ago, whenever I got clean and, decided I didn't want to actually work on anything, it just seemed like, and I was angry the whole time because it was like, there's nothing to do except for get high. You know what I mean?
Right.
Everything, even you see it on TV, it's always, there's drinking. Because that one's socially acceptable, but it's just as bad. In all honesty, I think alcohol is worse.
Yeah, in many ways.
It's one of the few that the detox can kill you.
Yeah.
Heroin, it's not going to be pleasant, but it's not necessarily going to kill you. But that one's socially acceptable. There's a bar on every corner. Luckily for me, drinking was just kind of there. It was never like my fixation, my obsession.
Sure.
It was a process.
Sure.
So
Absolutely. It's especially, compared to marijuana, et cetera. It's like alcohol. I mean, come on. It's crazy. I've been interested by the 12 steps. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. It seems to me like the first 3 steps are just accepting that you're an addict and that.
The first 3. Yeah, the first 3 kind of go together.
Yeah. And then, I wanted to ask. So you did, you did have those 7 years clean, but you didn't. You told me you sort of worked the program a little bit. Why do you think you maintained for that 7 years though? You were filling in with other things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was the biggest thing, and at the time I was married. And in all honesty, I didn't hang out with any of my friends. My ex-wife, we only hung out with her friends and they would drink. So, I mean, and I guess I would drink occasionally. But I wasn't, doing heroin. So I didn't see it as, active addiction. And because, like I said, I never was big on drinking, it was just kind of there. And, then plus I was getting older. So, after 30, you're hungover.
Absolutely. So that leads me, we'll get back to the 12 steps. That leads me to believe, I guess it's a common trope, for lack of a better word, but a common theme amongst people is, hanging out in the wrong crowd. There's some truth to that though, right? What do you think?
Yes.
Or maybe when you want to do those drugs, that's when you go and seek them.
Yeah, I had two separate groups.
Okay.
I never brought my using friends around for Christmas dinner.
Right.
And most of the time, drugs are lonely. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, you go out, you get high, and then you come home. You know what I mean? Like, and you may hang out with people, but it's not like you're actually connecting with those people in any way. You know what I mean? You're just sitting there high together. It's not.
Sure.
And you're stuck in your own head, which is, usually the start of addiction. Never works out well.
Absolutely. And so, I just think that's another way NA, AA are good programs because, can break you, now again, the social cohesion thing in the communities, but it's also breaking you off from those old friends or those old circles, right? Now you have a new circle of friends, right. A healthy circle of friends.
Right. But you can't count that. That's not all of it. They always mention people, places, and things. You got to get away from those things.
Yeah.
But you know what? You'll find new people, places, and things. You know what I mean? No matter where you go. So that's a big aspect of it is getting that social circle and having good people that you relate to on an actual human level. Rather than just having you get high, I get high. There's our connection.
Sure.
This is actually a meaningful connection for the most part.
Gotcha. So you would say the internal change is more important than the people, places, and things.
Absolutely. I mean, and to start, that's a big thing. Is,
right.
Having those new people to get to know and everything. But if you don't work on yourself, and that's why there's step work and everything. If you don't work on that, eventually your addiction is either going to take you back to it, or it's like I said, it's going to manifest itself in a different way.
Yeah, let's run through some of these other. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Did you do that one?
I haven't made it to that one yet. That one can be rough. You got to deal with a lot of stuff that you did. You got to do a lot of admittance. So I'm not looking forward to that one, but I'm gonna have to work it.
I think I would need a stack of books like this,
writing
down the bad shit.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. And in all honesty, you can work these steps. They're to be a better person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you can work them if you're not an addict. And, I honestly think that there's plenty of sober people that could, do better by dealing with them, And I think one of the other big things is, at least when you're working one of these programs, you're trying to be a better person. And you'll go to meetings and you'll see people that are happy. You know what I mean? And that's kind of weird when you first get sober because you go and you say, what the fuck are these people happy about?
Right.
Yeah. But the thing you'll hear a lot is, I didn't get sober to be miserable.
Sure.
Yeah. If you're just white knuckling it and you're not getting any better, is your life any better at that point?
Sure. Absolutely. Admitted to God and ourselves and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
Right. So that one, that goes right along with the 4-step. That's you have to admit those things because, and so I mentioned God and my issues with the religion before. I was raised Protestant, and I remember being younger, and I was really confused why, if you were Catholic, you had to confess in a confessional. Because it was always you were supposed to talk to God. And this is one thing I can kind of equate to that because, it's really easy to pray, or think that, I'm sorry for this, I'm sorry for that. When you physically have to talk to another person and admit it, that's a large hurdle to get over.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Having to admit that. But I will tell you that when you do that, you instantly feel better because it's not something that's just gnawing away at you anymore. It's out in the open. It's not something that you're dwelling on.
Absolutely. And then I guess these other ones, admitted to God and ourselves, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. Number 7, humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings. Number 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
That's the other big one.
That's a big one.
That's the big one, yeah.
Again, that's like you take your whole Christmas list of wrongdoing and then call all those people.
Yeah. There is a caveat on there that's made amends to them when possible.
Okay.
Where we're trying to make the amend might do more harm than
gotcha. Sure.
You don't want to put yourself in those bad situations either.
Yeah.
And I do want to say that I am by no means an expert on the 12 steps or anything like that. So I don't want people to think that I'm out here preaching. I'm just giving, this is what I know about it, and every day I learn more. So this is what I know today. Ask me tomorrow, totally different story.
Cool. We just want to hear, perspective, somebody who's living it. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. That kind of goes in line with the other ones. It's almost like admitting that you have a problem, accepting that it can be changed, be willing to have it changed with the aid of a higher power, and then taking actual steps to do that.
Right. It's like
form of a list or apologies.
What are the 7 or the 5? What is it? The grief. Is it grief?
The 5 stages.
The 5 stages of grief.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. You know what I mean?
Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him.
I don't know anything about that yet. I just want to put that out there. Maybe when we get there, but not right now. So.
Okay. And sought, thought, continue. Oh, wait. Having had spiritual awakening as a result of this steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. What does that mean?
Working on being a better person.
Giving back,
helping other people. And the one thing too about this is, you never stop working the steps. Even after you work them, a lot of times you go back, because guess what? Even when you're sober, you're going to have to make amends. You're going to do dumb things. Mistakes are a part of life.
And you mentioned before with the moment, I don't think we used the term though, and I know it's commonly used in the community in general, is rock bottom, right?
Oh yeah.
So that was kind of like your rock bottom, that incident.
Oh yeah. So, well, that was when I found out rock bottom has a basement. I mean, I thought I hit rock bottom before, but you could always go lower, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. And so you go to a meeting every day?
I do. I didn't go to one tonight because I'm here.
Okay.
I might do 2 tomorrow.
Aren't coffee? This is your meeting for today.
Okay. Yeah, I'm talking
meeting
about it. So anytime 2 addicts get together. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll talk. Maybe I'll do a future episode to talk about some of the shit that I've been through, and you can interview me.
Oh, okay. That'll be fun. We have some stories.
You can interview me. Absolutely. So, okay. Yeah, and rock bottom is an interesting concept because, like you just said, you found out rock bottom had a basement. So what do you mean by that? It's like, can't some people, maybe they think they've hit rock bottom, but they haven't?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's where you get a lot of people that go back out and relapse. They thought they had hit the rock bottom, and then, they think, well, I never did that. And it'll take them back out thinking, well, maybe I'm not as bad as I thought after hearing these stories and things like that. And again, that's like focusing on the differences instead of the similarities. But like, for instance, since in the 7 months that I've been going to meetings, I know at least 3 people that have gone back out and overdosed and died.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
they had multiple years clean, things like that.
Wow.
I've gone to, and it's depressing because even a guy I know, I remember hearing him sharing, he said, if you're new to the program, get a suit because you're going to go to a lot of funerals.
Wow. That's sad. Okay. What do you think, given your unique perspective, and we don't really have to get, well, I'm going to delve into politics a little bit. We don't have to get real crazy with it. What do you think are some things that could be done on like a higher level to maybe deal with the opiate crisis, reduce addiction in this country, et cetera, et cetera?
Oh, geez.
What about the legalization of marijuana, something like that? You think that's a good thing?
I'm not opposed to it. I know that I can't smoke marijuana. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, if alcohol is legal, I think that marijuana should be. You don't actually have to do anything to marijuana is kind of my biggest thing.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
Alcohol, you even have to ferment it. You know what I mean? There's
Sure.
absolutely nothing that you have to do with marijuana. I know that I can't do it, and I've had this discussion and thought about it before. It's like, oh, well, if it's legal, I could do it. Yeah, well, alcohol is legal, and I know that I can't do that because if I start doing one, that's another way that the addiction will manifest itself. It'll just be kind of waiting, lying low, and being like, oh, well, you've successfully not used. You could eat a painkiller here, you could do that, and then that spiral is just going to start over again. But I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I think it should be taxed for sure. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made in that. Look at Colorado and all the states that have legalized it for recreational use. They're just kind of raking in the dollars at this point.
Sure.
And I mean, that's a lot of money that you could use for to help people.
Do you think though that maybe, I mean, I'm trying to go with my opinion, maybe loosening up the rule, making marijuana legal would reduce the amount of opiate addiction.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know there's statistics that show that.
Let me ask you this. You think marijuana is a gateway drug?
I think alcohol is a gateway drug.
Bigger than marijuana?
Absolutely, because it's socially acceptable. I mean, and now marijuana is becoming more acceptable, but everybody drinks. Like, you know what I mean? Like when you think of people, I know people that have never smoked weed in their life. You know what I mean? And I'm like amazed whenever I hear that. Like, you never tried weed, but they drank because it's on every street corner. You know what I mean? Especially in Pittsburgh. Go to Southside. You know what I mean? There's, I think there's more bars per square foot in Southside than anywhere in the world or something. But I really do think alcohol is worse because even, with a lot of other drugs, with marijuana, yes, it can affect your ability to drive, but it's not nearly as bad as alcohol.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that one's legal, and it just always kind of blows my mind. But a lot of people don't think of alcohol as a drug.
Sure. Right. A lot of stupid people.
Absolutely.
Because it is a drug, right? Anything,
mind altering.
Right. Tobacco's a drug. Caffeine's a drug.
Caffeine's probably the biggest abused drug.
I abuse it daily.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, they always say that, but you go to NA meetings and AA meetings and all you see is people drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. But again, caffeine's not usually ruining people's lives.
Sure. I guess my thing is, the whole concept of a gateway drug is like, because there's individuals in society, right, who will just use alcohol and they'll never take that step. And then there's individuals who will maybe just use marijuana. And then you get people use marijuana and alcohol and will never take that next step. But everybody who's taken that step, to do the harder drugs, everyone who has gone that far, most of the time, probably 95% of the time, alcohol or marijuana came before it.
Right.
So to me, the whole concept of a gateway, I struggle with that concept. I don't know if it's real or not. I don't know if it's real. Because you could say that these people that were going to, the people who end up there were going to go there anyway. I don't know.
The way I look at it is, you always hear the statistic when they talk about raising the driving age. They say, well, more accidents happen between the ages of 16 and 18. So let's raise it to 18. All that's going to do is make more accidents between the ages of 18 and 20. You know what I mean? Because it's new. It's and it's kind of similar. The way that I look at it is, it's less stigmatized.
Yeah.
It's socially acceptable between alcohol and marijuana.
Yeah.
And, you got to start somewhere. You know what I mean? Those are the ones that are the easiest to get, especially, with marijuana. Now, I don't necessarily believe in a gateway drug. It just happens to be the one that started it. Because there's plenty of addicts that never took any drugs. You know what I mean? You have obsessive compulsive, behaviors. That's the biggest thing. And it's not necessarily obsessive compulsive disorder, but you do have obsessions. You do have,
I see what you're saying.
So
it can manifest itself differently in different people.
Right.
Right. Some people it may manifest in drug use. Other people it may manifest in some
shoplifting and, shopping, anything that gives you that jolt. Even when I first got sober, there's plenty of times where I went shopping and I bought stuff and I was excited because I bought stuff. And then 10 minutes later, that buzz wore off and I was taking it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
buyer's remorse.
It's funny too, because we, in this society, we aggrandize, highly successful people and we probably should, but those highly successful people often have some sort of highly successful, they're probably highly obsessive as well. You know,
Oh, yeah.
they have the personality traits that a drug addict may have. You know, they're just maybe you could say funneling that in a healthy manner.
Absolutely. I mean, you hear all kinds of things. I'm obsessed with like serial killers.
Okay.
I love serial killer podcasts, things like that. I love horror movies. But it's some large statistic where like most of the Fortune 500 company CEOs display all of the same characteristics as psychopaths.
Right.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's how you channel it.
Yeah, how it manifests. Maybe that actually gives credence to the gateway drug concept then. Because here's the thing: is you got all these let's say in society you got like 35% of people in society have these obsessive compulsive, right? And if all of them end up being exposed to drugs, they all have a high, most of them are going to become addicts because of it. But if you can keep them from ever using the drugs, it may never manifest in that way.
I think the gateway drug is loneliness. Okay. Yeah. And there's a study, and
I like that.
I'm horrible. I forget the guy's name, but they did a study with rats, and you'll hear this probably every addict has ever heard it, where they took a rat and they put it in a cage, and they had a water bottle, and then they had a bottle that was laced with like cocaine. And the rat on its own would eventually only drink from the one laced with cocaine.
Okay.
Until it inevitably, I think the survival rate was 0. Like it almost always ended up killing itself. But they did the same experiment years later where they put multiple rats in the cage, and they did the same thing where they had just the water bottle and the one laced with cocaine. And when the rats were together, I think the suicide rate was 0. They like never used it because they called it like rat park.
Yeah.
And it was because they had that, they were all together.
The community,
right? They had
social
that, right? Exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating to think about. I actually agree with you. I mean, you put it that way.
It takes you out of yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everybody has their own thing going on, no matter what.
Sure. So maybe things. NA aside, but more things again. That's I go back. Build community, this and that. Have people in your lives.
Absolutely. I mean, and I go to cookouts. I go to NA cookouts. We all went to like a pirate game. I've gone to like Ocean City for a NA convention. There was 8,500 people there.
Really?
Sitting in a room with 8,500 people.
Yeah.
Saying that they're an addict. It's pretty powerful. I mean, it's hard to deny.
Absolutely.
And these people are all happy. It was funny. No matter where you went, we went to a restaurant, and it was a bar. It was the only place open after the one event. And we're sitting like as far away from the bar as possible. And these two women come in, and they're also wearing like the lanyards that say they're there. And I noticed someone looked over. Are you guys sitting as far away from the bar as possible? You're damn right we are. It was just kind of funny, but everybody was happy. It was a good time. It really was.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool. It's there's a little bit of irony there that you have all those sober people in a city that's notorious for alcohol.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, those are the places that you need those meetings. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
And I forget where there was something that I wanted to bring up. It's the stigma, because the hardest thing about going back to a relapse is going back to facing the people in NA. And it's funny because, when you're there and you see somebody come in who had time clean and they pick up a 24-hour key tag, it's inspiring.
Yeah, I bet.
Because you're like, wow, they made it back. They did it. Yeah. But when you're on the other side of that, and you're the one that has to go pick up that 24-hour key tag again, that is the hardest thing in the world, is to walk back in there, because you have to admit that all over again, and you feel defeated. And it's funny because when from one side you feel like it's the lowest possible low, but at the same time you're inspiring all these other people because they're like, wow, they did it. And I just like to bring that up because if you're struggling with it, then absolutely go to a meeting. I guarantee that when you walk in, you're gonna walk in the door, somebody's gonna give you a hug, and they want to see you be better.
Yeah,
and they actually will care about you. So.
And tell them a little bit. There's sponsor program, correct?
Right. So
how does that work?
So the sponsor is basically your guide. That's the person that helps you go through the steps. That's that. When you admitted to yourself and to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. That's generally the person that you admitted to. And it's just, sponsorship can be temporary. Most sponsors are temporary. You learn as much as you can from one person, and you possibly move on to the next.
Cool. Have you found that helpful? I mean, your sponsors have been.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just, and it's funny, like you'll hear just little cliche sayings and things like that. And it's like, one of the biggest ones, first thought wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, how often, whenever I gambled, I remember, okay, I think it's going to be black. We're like, okay, then I'm going to bet red.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that was how I always ended up with it.
Yes.
Because first thought wrong.
Yes, absolutely. That's probably good advice in all areas of life. What have you sponsored anybody? Or
no, and I'm still working on me. Generally, they say a year, and that's why I wanted to throw that in there before, that I am by no means an expert on any of this. And hopefully somebody can learn something from my story. Hopefully I can help somebody, because that's what they always say. Hopefully somebody can follow my footsteps and get better, and hopefully I stay better, and I don't go back out there, because it is one day at a time. All it takes is one slip up.
Do you have a Twitter or anything? Do you want to or I could put something in your comments.
I do not.
Do you want people to contact you or
not? Yeah, sure, whatever.
I can put your Facebook.
Yeah,
link to your Facebook.
Yeah, feel free to message me. Joe will add it. I'll be more than happy to talk to anybody. Don't hesitate.
Yeah, awesome. And most of my viewers are in the Pittsburgh area, but for those of you who aren't, we're in the Pittsburgh area, but you can still reach out. Anything out? Well, let me ask you this: any funny stories from, like, say, NA, or you seen anything funny that you want to share?
So anonymity is the spirit of it. So you're not really supposed to share anything.
Okay.
I'm sure I have something. Not at this time, but I'm sure that I'll think of a great story at some point. I can share. Okay, I think this is funny, and it's probably my twisted sense of humor. But I mentioned that I worked on the road, and how I'm taking drugs with me, so that I can get through the week.
Okay.
And so Monday morning, of course, because I left Sunday night, those drugs were gone.
Okay.
So I got paid, and it just kind of this sick, twisted thinking. I'm like, how am I going to find drugs? And I'm like looking up needle exchanges. I'm looking up rehab, because I'm like, if I just go hang out there, I bet you I could find somebody.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing, and I thought this was genius.
Okay.
And again, sick and twisted, I started looking up prostitutes.
Okay.
And I would message them and say, hey, I'm out of town. I'm just trying to find drugs. And guess what? It worked. Yeah. And I remember showing up to this hotel room, and the girl got me drugs, and she's like, are we going to have sex? And I said, no. I actually, all I wanted was the drugs. You can have some of my drugs. And then I became friends with her boyfriend, who was hanging out next door waiting for me to have sex with his girlfriend.
Oh, Lord.
So, I mean, it was interesting. But, so, that's funny and horrible all in itself. But, it shows you the lengths that you'll go to, because I obsessed over it. You know what I mean? And you start coming up with these crazy schemes, and it seems genius at the time. And, that one worked. I got robbed once from a hooker, but then I found another one that I got drugs off of. So
did the robbery happen in the same way? You were trying to reach her for drugs?
It was 10 minutes apart.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like this girl beat me for $100. And so then I just found another one, and I went down the street, and she got me drugs.
Gotcha. So, I think it's funny, but it's also, I think it's also a good lesson, that you don't want to be, to be in that position.
Right. Yeah. I never thought that I'd be hanging out in a hotel room in, the ghetto in Michigan
with the boyfriend of
the hooker who just got me some drugs. Yeah.
Okay. What about any other, like, final thoughts that you want to share with the audience about recovery? I will tell you that if you are in the grips of addiction, if you think you might be an addict, please reach out to somebody. You'd be surprised how many people actually care for you. I remember, whenever I got out of the psych ward, I felt better, but at the same time, what sent me in there was loneliness. I felt totally alone. And when I got out, like 5 different people had stopped by my house because they hadn't heard from me. Yeah. And I remember my dad saying, like, for somebody who doesn't think anybody likes him, like, there sure are a lot of people. So, if you're in the grips of it, please reach out to somebody. I guarantee that you mean the world to somebody. Awesome. And life's good for you right now? Everything better?
Oh, absolutely. You got to deal with stuff every day, but
Sure.
every day it's getting better. And like I had a job review. I got fired, a year ago because I was in active addiction, and they wanted nothing to do with me. And I had a job review like a month ago, and they said, "We wish we had 10 more of you."
Wow.
And I was like,
"That's awesome.
I don't think that you actually want that." In all honesty, 10 of me together would not be a great idea.
That's awesome. That's good to hear. It's, and not your situation, but I deal with a lot of people who have trouble, doing criminal defense, and they've just been in jail or whatnot, and they have trouble getting jobs. But a lot of times when they get the jobs, they're fucking awesome.
Oh yeah,
people love them.
Well, there's even a saying in there that character defects are just like attributes that you haven't learned how to work yet. You can use this. A lot of people, they have the gift of gab, and they used it to manipulate and steal and things like that. Then they turn around, they're a salesman. Holy shit!
Right?
What I mean?
It
all depends on how you channel that energy.
Absolutely. That goes back to what we were saying before.
Yeah, absolutely.
High performers. All right, so maybe what we're gonna do is we're gonna have when Zach's reached 1 year, he's gonna come back and tell us how the last 6 months went, and maybe when you start to sponsor some. Well, again, everything's anonymous.
It is anonymous,
but we definitely like to have you back sometime. So thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
And we're gonna delve deeper into this issue in the future, and like I said, maybe we're gonna have Zack interview me. That's
also writing questions.
That's in a couple of we went to high school together, so we could probably tell some stories.
I guarantee that.
But thank you. If you enjoyed the episode, you learned something, subscribe, like, and share. Subscribe, like, and share. That helps me out a lot. Zack likes my sales pitch, and I'll put some contact info for him in the comments, and feel free to comment, and I try to reply to every comment. So thank you for tuning in.